You've heard about containers. You've also probably used Docker to create and manage a ton of containers. Now, you may or may not have heard of ContainerD, but ContainerD is a container runtime just like Docker. So in today's video, I'm going to talk to you about ContainerD. I'm going to explain to you how it is different from Docker, and I'm going to show you a hands-on on how you can start using ContainerD. So let's go ahead and get started without wasting too much time. Before moving on to any sort of diagrams for visualization, I wanted to first understand about standards. So in the whole cloud native world, we have a lot of standards, which make it easy to plug and play a lot of different technologies. Why do we need all this plug and play? Because we have one big system called as Kubernetes. Kubernetes has got a ton of different smaller components. Now these components are something like a container runtime, something to manage storage, another thing to manage your networks, and so on. Now there are tons of solutions which you can use, but if you do not have a proper standard in place, then no matter what you plug and play, it's all going to have some sort of a conflict. In order to avoid this sort of a conflict, we have got standards. Now ContainerD is a container runtime based on one such standard. That standard is what we call as the CRI, Container Runtime Interface. Basically, it's just a standard for multiple container runtimes so that you can plug it into cloud native based workloads and it will just work. You don't have to make any specific configurations or change the code to make it run. It follows a standard, hence it will run. If you want to learn more about this whole standards, then go and check out this video by my friend Kunal. He's done a really great job at explaining a lot of different standards. Talking about ContainerD, ContainerD is one of the industry specific runtimes. It's basically based on the CRI standard, the Container Runtime Interface, which is one of the many open standards out there. If you watched my Docker video, I did mention that ContainerD is a part of Docker. So at the top, you've got the Docker engine, and below the Docker engine, you've got ContainerD, right? ContainerD is the low level features. It doesn't have all the tons of functionalities that Docker possesses, but it will just run your containers and it'll help you manage those containers. That's it. You might not get features such as networking or a lot of storage related things. ContainerD's use case is not any of that. It's simply to run and manage your containers. Like I mentioned before, ContainerD was designed to work as a standard, which means it is supposed to plug and play with Kubernetes. And I mentioned that Kubernetes has a ton of different things for networking storage. The networking and storage part will be handled by those specific plugins. All ContainerD wants to do is manage, create, delete your containers. That's it. Nothing else. Now I want to go ahead and show you a little bit of hands-on on how you can get started with ContainerD. And I'm going to be referring to the docs and I'm going to be taking you along with this process. I'll try to explain every single step in as much details as I can, and I'm going to help you understand ContainerD and everything you can do with it. So let's go ahead and get started with the hands-on part. All right, so first of all, before even using ContainerD, you have to install ContainerD, right? And as always, I'm going to use a Killer Coda instance. I'm going to use an Ubuntu Playground to show you all of the hands-on. So we've got actually three options for installing ContainerD. We can do it from the official binaries, we can build it from source, or we can use a package manager. I'm not going to do it with the package manager because you might be on a system which might not support it. For example, over here, I don't see Arch Linux. So we're just going to install it from the official binaries. And I'm going to explain step by step what all we're doing. So step one, we have to actually download the binary of ContainerD and install it. We've got the link right here. So let's go ahead and copy a download link. Let's copy the download link of ContainerD 1.7.16. So if I scroll down, I have to get the correct file. Now, as you can see, there are a lot of different files over here, right? So we want to figure out which system exactly we want to target. Now, if you're running this locally, you already know what system you have. It's either ARM 64 or AMD 64. but here I'm doing it on a cloud playground. So let's quickly go ahead and find out what this is. So I can do a uname -a, and you can see it's x86-64. So it's AMD 64. This is the package which we need. So let's copy this link and let's do a curl. Now remember, you can directly go ahead and download this as well if you're running it locally. But since I'm running it in a cloud playground, I need to do it via curl. So let's curl it with this command, and we want the output to go into this file name. So let's copy this and paste it here. This is basically the file that we're going to put the output in. If you don't know what this operator is, I've made a video about streams and stream manipulation. Go and check that out. We've got the ContainerD binaries downloaded. Now let's go ahead and do the next step, which is to actually untar it. Tar is basically like a zip file. In Windows, you've got zip files, jar files, right? Tar is a similar thing. So let's go ahead and untar this file and make sure you're passing in the correct file name. So up here, I got an error because I had the wrong file name. I had version 1.6.2 in my file name, but the actual version is 1.7.16. So make sure that you have all of that details correct, and then go ahead and untar it. Next step, we have to actually enable this ContainerD service. So for that, first, we want to do a daemon reload. A daemon reload basically is going to refresh all of your systemd units, and if you've got some new units inside, that will get loaded as well. If you don't know what systemd is, I've made a video on that as well. So do go ahead and check that out if you don't understand that. So let's go ahead and do a systemctl daemon reload. That's done. Now we have to go ahead and enable the ContainerD unit. So we can do systemctl enable --now ContainerD. Systemctl enable is quite self-explanatory. We're giving an instruction to systemd that we want to enable this unit called as ContainerD. The --now basically means enable it right now. Now, enable basically means every time you restart your PC, you restart your instance, ContainerD will start automatically. But if I just did a systemctl enable ContainerD, it wouldn't start it right now. It would start it on my next restart. But I want to enable it, which means that it starts every time I boot up this machine, and I want it to start right now as well. So I will pass in the --now command. And let's go ahead and check the status, systemctl status ContainerD. And you can see that it's active and running. And here we've got all of our log files for it. So next step is we have to install runc. Now, I've mentioned this in the Docker video as well, but runc is a low-level implementation of how you're going to interact with system resources, and that will handle creating the container. So that is more of a code-related thing, which is going to help you to create containers. ContainerD is going to be the interface which you talk with, and at the lower level, at the kernel level, runc is going to be the requirement which is used by ContainerD for creating containers. Let's go ahead and get the stable release of runc and install it into the VM. So we already saw that we're running an AMD 64, so we'll copy this, curl it, and we'll give the output into a file called runc.amd64. And we've got the file here as well. Now we want to go ahead and install it. So for that, I can simply copy this command and paste it in here. Make sure that the file names are accurate, and they are. So let's go ahead and run it. I got an error over here because I had an extra dollar symbol over here, which is an invalid symbol. This should have installed runc. And if you want to ensure it's installed, let's go ahead and cat this folder. And that tells us that we already have the big binary file of runc. Next step is installing a CNI plugin. Now CNI is also one of these different standards. CNI is your container networking interface, meant for running your networking things. Now containers do require networking because there's a concept called as network namespaces. It's basically going to control how communications are going to go inside your container from your local file system, and then through that go to the entire internet. So for that, we need the container networking interface. So once again, let's go ahead and get the latest file of that. And the file which I'm looking for is right here on top, the first one. Let's go ahead, curl that, make sure I give it the proper file name, the output file name. And I should have it right here. I've got it. Now let's go ahead and untar this as well. But first we have to make a new directory. We have to make a directory in opt for the CNI. Let's go ahead and create that, and then we can untar it. We've created the directory, and now we will untar this. And once again, make sure that the file name is correct. I made the exact same mistake here as well, which I made for ContainerD. So make sure the file name is correct. And once that's done, all of this different files have been extracted to opt CNI bin, and we should now be ready to go ahead and use ContainerD. Okay, before we can actually interact with ContainerD, we need an interface for interacting with ContainerD. We need a CLI tool for that. Now here they've listed a couple of tools. There is CTR, which is the built-in one with ContainerD. So we should already have CTR over here. Let's take a look, CTR, and we've got it. But it's also mentioned that this is for debugging only, but we want a tool for general purposes. So we're going to go ahead and use nerdcuttle. There's also crycuttle, but this is more for a Kubernetes context. When we go ahead and learn about Kubernetes, talk about Kubernetes, that time we'll use more of crycuttle to look at all the containers that are running. And crycuttle is also quite useful for debugging and seeing how all things work out within Kubernetes. That's going to be really fun when we do it. So just be excited whenever we drop those. For now, let's go ahead and install nerdcuttle. So let's open its GitHub repository. And nerdcuttle as well, we are going to have to install the binary itself. So if you scroll down, you can see that there's a brew package installed, but I'm not going to use brew. I'm just going to do it from the binary. So let's go ahead and download the binary and then install it from that. So right here, I'm in the releases folder, and I just have to go and find the correct binary, which is this one right here. Let's curl that as well. So I'm going to extract the nerdcuttle binaries right here. So let's do a tar and extract nerdcuttle. And we've got the nerdcuttle CLI. Let's do a dot nerdctl dot slash nerdctl. And we have that, and we also have the, now ignore what this rootless thing is. We're going to just ignore that for now. We're just going to focus on nerdcuttle, and so that I don't have to type this command every single time, what we are going to do is we're going to give an alias to nerdcuttle. So let's first do a pwd, and then we can do alias nerdcuttle is equal to /root/nerdctl. And now if we do a nerdctl, there we can use it. Now let's actually go ahead and use nerdcuttle to create a container. So we'll use this exact same example given in the docs. So what we're doing is we're running a Redis container. Let's go ahead and do that with nerdcuttle, and it should do the exact same things which it does with Docker. It'll first pull the image from Docker Hub or whichever container registry Redis exists in. Then it'll get the image and start the container based off of the image. Now right here, Redis is ready to use. So let's open a second tab over here, and we can do nerdcuttle list containers. We're going to have to set the alias once again. So let's do that. Alias nerdcuttle /root/nerdcuttle. And now let's go ahead and do a nerdcuttle list containers. And it's an unknown command. So let's do a nerdcuttle and see what the exact command is that we want, which is this nerdcuttle container. So we can do a nerdcuttle container list, and it's showing us here that we've got, and if you do a nerdcuttle, you can see that you've got all these different options. Similar to Docker, but it's a lot more lightweight compared to Docker. Why? I mentioned that in the beginning of the video. So that was all about ContainerD. I hope you learned a good amount of ContainerD, how to use it as well, and you also learned about nerdcuttle. Now in the future, when we learn about Kubernetes, having this knowledge about ContainerD is going to be quite beneficial to you. So I'm really excited to talk to you about Kubernetes later down the line, and let's learn quite a lot of cloud native and systems when we do that. So excited for that. See you all in the next video.